and the second, which I presented on stage, so I won't go through the entire presentation now, but just for those who missed it, was us funding a social impact project called the GoodDollar experiment, in which we're trying to solve what we believe is one of the biggest challenges in today's world, which is wealth equality. And I'll do this really fast just to try and provide some information for those who haven't been during the presentation. We've basically assembled a team of academics, both from economics, computer sciences, and financial engineering, to analyze the problem of wealth inequality in the world, where, as you might know, 20% of the wealth population, the richest, own 94% of the world's wealth. And the top 42 richest people in the world actually own more wealth than the poorest 3.7 billion people. And we're seeing this as a very big challenge, especially with the rise of robotics, automation, and AI. People expect more than 800 million human jobs to be lost over the next 10 to 15 years, basically leading us to a very problematic situation. Very luckily, great minds have been exploring this for years, from Thomas Paine in the 1792 to people like Martin Luther King, talking about it in the 60s, to Elon Musk, who's afraid of AI and think that universal basic income can actually solve the coming issues. Mark Zuckerberg has mentioned numerous times that universal basic income, where we provide guaranteed income to people, can actually provide a solution to these problems. And to those who think, how does this coincide with free markets, then Nobel Prize winning Milton Friedman also discussed this a lot in his theory and research. Unfortunately, the problem is that it's very hard to do this on a government level. There has been a lot of research and experiments done with universal basic income, but since government trust, or the trust of people in government, is an all-time low, we don't believe that eventually government can solve the issue of global inequality. Government can only solve local issues, and by definition, people don't necessarily want government to solve those issues. Which brings us to really our expertise at eToro. We've been in the crypto space since 2010. I've actually been writing on the GoodDollar since 2008, before the rise of Bitcoin. And we believe that this technology enables a new era of research and opportunities to build basically a global cryptocurrency that has a better and fairer wealth distribution. Where if you look today at the cryptocurrency, both narrative, which is to some extent negative, and the actual wealth distribution in cryptocurrencies, it's actually worse than in most economies. So here I'm quoting Nouriel Roubini, which shows that the Gini coefficient measuring inequality is actually worse in Bitcoin than in North Korea. What we're announcing today is basically our funding of research called the GoodDollar, where the main pillars of the GoodDollar, working with, by the way, a lot of various projects that are looking into the same problem and how blockchain can solve it. The main pillars of the GoodDollar is to solve basically the identity issue. How can we create a blockchain that actually understands who people are and have a proof of personhood? And we're doing that through basically social signals, and developing technology to enable people to basically register, identify themselves, and vote, enable others to vote on their identity. The second part is the social distribution, which we've been researching, and I'll talk in a bit. And the third is, how do you create this completely as a decentralized, autonomous organization? Identity is a big issue when you're thinking about universal basic income, or basically distributing funds to every single account or every single person, because you need to verify that there's no fraud and people can't create fake accounts. To that purpose, what we're relying on basically to solve this problem is that people use their identity in a public way, and therefore enabling others to vote whether their identity is real. There is some algorithmic logic in how do you identify a person based on how many people say that he is actually who he says he is. We've already created some code which is actually launched on the GitHub, so everything we do is an open source project which we publish. And there are numerous actual projects that we're collaborating with to solve the identity on the blockchain, or their sovereign identity in a decentralized manner. The second part is the social interest. In the GoodDollar experiment, we're talking about creating a 10% inflation, which is from the biblical term tether, to actually create and mint more good dollars for those who need it most. And we've researched basically based on John Rawls' theory of justice to define what we believe is a fairer distribution. And as you can see, we've done a lot of economic research into it. The concept of Rawls distribution, if you think about traditional economics, where we said 20% of the rich own 94% of wealth, then interest on wealth, basically the 20% will receive 94% of the total interest. Where in the Rawls distribution concept, you actually take that interest, and instead of giving it to the rich, you actually give it to those who need it most, you give it to the poor. And the logic is quite simple. You basically give the interest rate first to the poorest person, then to the second poorest person, then to the third, vice versa. And generally you give the entire interest or social interest rate that you're minting to those who need it most. And from our analysis, we've basically looked at how this would impact the Gini coefficient, which is the standard way of measuring inequality, and found that this actually improves the Gini coefficient significantly, both in the first year, and as year goes by, it actually improves the Gini coefficient to numbers that basically the world has never seen. The third pillar is the fact that we're building this as smart contracts in a decentralized ecosystem, which enables us to basically build something that we don't control and nobody controls. Again, we're looking at this as a series of experiments, basically technology implementations to show how to build this cryptocurrency. And the concept of the decentralized autonomous organization is to enable people from all around the world to basically invest or donate money into the smart contract. And as more people basically invest or donate funds into the GoodDollar smart contract, they increase the price of the GoodDollar and therefore distribute significantly more social interest. And what we're doing is we're actually quantifying this research to show how much money is needed to create basically sustainable finance and to actually create a big impact on those who need it most. So the way it actually works is people are able to either invest or donate into the smart contract that increases the price of good dollars for everyone in the economy, and then basically good dollars that are being minted are worth more for everyone in the economy. So potentially $1 million investment into the GoodDollar can actually generate an impact of $1 million a year for numerous years versus just giving it away once. And so the reason we think this is important is we're seeing more and more interest both into cryptocurrencies, but now that cryptocurrencies exist, when some countries, in this case, you're seeing basically the trading volumes in Argentina and local bitcoins, places where the currency devalues, the citizens of that country basically are looking for alternatives. And the alternatives of current cryptocurrencies, while at some perspective are already better potentially than devaluing fiat money, do not have a good purpose to them and do not necessarily generate positive social impact. We believe that in order to prepare for the next large global financial crisis, a lot of research should be done in order to create basically a better ecosystem and better cryptocurrencies or the GoodDollar. So this is quickly what we've presented today. and again has a very good relation also to the fact that we're enabling our customers through the wallet to basically start sending and receiving cryptocurrencies as we believe in the future of tokenized assets. And we're inviting people to basically join our efforts. This is a research and an experiment in order to build infrastructure for the future. So now I'm very happy to open it for Q&A.
Any questions?
Any questions? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Thomas from Hungary. So you talked a lot about universal basic income and your research about it. Most of the aspects, or actually all of the aspects that we saw were economical. Do you consider any psychological or maybe philosophical aspects when thinking about how a universal basic income could work? Just giving you a reference of what I'm thinking. I'm currently reading Fukuyama's new book on identity, and he argues against a universal basic income in the form that is currently being talked about, because most people lose some part of their identity or dignity, and they become miserable because they feel useless to the society because they don't contribute. So just getting something without contribution could create a huge psychological burden on people.
So we are looking at this, and it is important to note that we're looking not necessarily at the research of universal basic income, but we call it open universal basic income. And the main difference is it's a voluntary system, it's detached from government, and it's based on technology, which means you can either participate or not participate in the program, in the technology, and you can consider this more basically as something that runs in parallel to the economy. I agree with a lot of the opposition towards government-based universal basic income for a couple of reasons. One is the minimum basic income in one country might very much differ from another country. Second, there's a question of philosophy again about what is basic income, how much is enough, and who should define what is enough. And therefore, the concept of open UBI is you build these platforms, and the GoodDollar will be worth as much as people are willing to invest and donate into it. And if that creates sort of that psychological behavior, people will either not participate in it, or the price will not increase. So there won't be an incentive. But in any case, we're not talking about actually sponsoring the basic income to a certain threshold of people. So potentially the first years of this experiment, this can give $1 a month, but as more people invest and donate into this through an ecosystem we build, maybe it could become $100 a month or $1,000 a month, again, really depending on how many people also register and use this.
Hi, this is Silvio from Italy, and I'd like to ask you a question about this. People investing in crypto values generally have a lot of money, or have much money, and a high level of culture. So they've studied probably of university and so on. So how do you suppose that poor people can get to the platform, as they don't know that the platform exists, either they don't know how to use the platform, how they don't have the standard media, the smartphone,
Sure,
or whatever, to use the platform. So how you get to the poor people? That's the point.
So we assume that there isn't a direct correlation between the sophistication of people necessarily and how poor or rich they are. And I think that's something very interesting that we've seen in the cryptocurrency community. Potentially there are today more cryptocurrency traders in the world than stock traders. And the question is why, is because we lowered the barriers to entry. In cryptocurrency, you can start with $10 or $50 and start trading with 100 different exchanges and convert it and potentially make money. Of course, the fact that people saw 10 or 50x returns also contributed to that. But we definitely saw sort of the detachment, and that's something we always saw in eToro, is a person's wealth does not necessarily define a person's wisdom or education, etc. So I definitely think that initially we're expecting sort of the smartest, poorest people to join this and to experiment this. We're expecting people who want to educate themselves about how this works, want to learn more and participate in something that in nature is digital. And we believe that that ecosystem, if you think about, developing countries, there are sufficient number of very smart people who are yet poor, that once they come into this, they can bring the rest. And again, it's a different perception. We're not trying to teach people or give people away money. We are trying to build an ecosystem, and that ecosystem by definition at first attracts people who are able to sort of absorb, learn, and understand how to use it. Surprisingly today, there are more people with mobile phones and connection to the internet than people with bank accounts. So we definitely see the need. There are more people who can use cryptocurrencies. Again, this is, today we're looking at 50 million people at best using cryptocurrencies, which is still a very small minority of the world. But a part of this is, how do you bring this technology to the next billion people? And generally, giving away free money is a very good way to bring in more people in.